Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you all made it out this morning. And I do want to say I do have over 20 years experience with the economic and decennial census. I've been with Geography Division for the last 6 months, and it actually brought to light all the stuff that we did for the economic census, foreign trade data, where all the underlying address data came from. So I'm really excited to share that with you today. In the Geography Division, this slide actually kind of helps paint the picture of what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years since 2010. We're actually re-engineering address canvassing. If you remember, in 2010 census, we actually had 150,000 workers come out, we call them canvassers, and actually either drive or walk every block and road in the United States and Puerto Rico. It was one of the most labor-intensive and expensive operations of the 2010 census. So for 2020, we're trying to do things a little bit differently. We're going to re-engineer address canvassing. There are actually 3 components that we're doing for address canvassing. The first one is 100% canvas in the office. The second component is doing in-field work where a fieldwork component is needed. We do understand that you can't do everything in the office. And the third component is how do we audit our work? If we are doing it in the office, how do we know what we're getting back from our partners is actually accurate? And my next slides will actually show you the progress we have in all these 3 activities. Let's talk a little bit about our program, the Geographic Support System. We call it GSS. It is a program for continual research and update to the address frame. This actually supports and maintains the geographic and cartographic infrastructure for the Census Bureau. It allows us to do our data collection, processing, tabulation, and dissemination for all our programs and surveys throughout the Census Bureau. The continual updates actually come from a variety of sources. The U.S. Postal Service is one. We get a file from them twice a year, tribal, state, and local governments, and through some commercial vendors. We actually started GSS in 2011. By 2013, we actually started data collection. And from this point on, we've actually been doing data collection for the last 4 years. And you all have actually been helpful with that with your boundary and annexation surveys. So the main goal of GSS is to attempt to acquire partner file information from the tribal, state, and local governments for all 74,002 census tracts in the United States and Puerto Rico. And as you can see on the slide, we're actually on track to do that. The goal from 2013 to 2016 is to collect 15,000 tracts per year. And for fiscal year 17, which we're in right now, is to collect the last 11,805 tracts. What we do with those tracts, once we actually get them, we put them through content verification, address evaluation, and then if there are any updates needed, we update the master address file. As you can see from this map is actually a picture of everything that we've actually tried to acquire. And you can see the gray is where we haven't acquired. This map is as of February 7th, 2017. And you can see it's very little gray left in this map. So we're well on our way to have all of our tracts acquired. The real reason for the GSS initiative, and GSS is one of our testing to see if we actually could re-engineer address canvassing for 2020. So in 2014, after some data collection and some testing and evaluation, the Geography Division made a decision and put out a memorandum that in 2014 that we should go ahead and continue with address canvassing re-engineering. One of the components we talked about getting information from the USPS, tribal, state, and local governments, but we also were looking at commercial vendors. When you're getting information from your local partners, you don't always get complete coverage. So we wanted to see if there was any way we could actually use some of the commercial information that's out there. So the Census Bureau actually purchased 5 address data sets and 1 spatial data set to do some testing on. There were 2 purposes. The first one was to see if we could use it to supplement those areas where we had coverage gaps. And the second purpose was to see if we can actually validate our master address file. We did our evaluation in 2016, and we found that the information could be used as a supplement if needed, and we actually could use some of that data to validate our database. So let's talk about in-office address canvassing, that first component. The purpose of in-office address canvassing is to do 100% review in the office. There are two main components of in-office address canvassing: interactive review, or IR, and active block resolution, ABR. Interactive review was the very first component. It started in September of 2015 at our National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. The goal is to actually review all 11.1 million U.S. blocks in the United States. As of February 14th, we have actually completed 9 million blocks. So we've actually done 81% of our review of the entire nation. As you can see, and 72% of them are stable. So what that means is we actually reviewed them, found no change, and set our address values up to date. After that, another 16.5% had some change and needed to go to our next section of active block resolution. And we're well on our way to actually getting all of our files reviewed and interactive review by the end of 2017. So a little bit how the analysts actually use our software to do interactive review. There's actually a 7-step process when you're doing interactive review an analyst will go through. The first one is they will compare imagery from 2 points in time, which is what this slide is actually showing. And the 2 points in time is a baseline vintage, which is approximately 2009 vintage. And then we have current vintage, which you say is within 6 months of time of imagery. They'll actually review it, determine if there's any possible growth or decline in an area, identify if there's any area that they think may be for possible growth or decline. Are there any missing or misaligned roads based on our address file? Determine if a block has under coverage or over coverage, and we're going to see some slides on that next. And determine if the block is already built out, getting built out, or will not ever be developed. After that, they actually save the file and go on. This is actually our tool we call BARCA, Block Assessment Research and Classification Application. It was actually built in-house at Census Bureau using our Tiger Web and the imagery service. So as you can see from this slide, the left side actually shows the imagery from the last 6 months. The right side actually shows the vintage imagery. And what users will do will actually use the icons on the left side to actually set a pin if there's a change. If there's no change, they'll just save it and move on to the next. So this is a little bit zoomed in closer of what you can see. So on the right side, you can actually see a growth for the top one. The right side, you didn't have as many, but the left side, you can definitely see that they actually had more housing development in the new vintage. And you can actually see a decline on the bottom one. On the right side, you see that was the vintage 2009. And on the current one, you see that there's no housing in the same development. This slide actually shows undercoverage. And the undercoverage areas are where those little green splotches are, right there. This is from Tallahassee, Florida. And what undercoverage is to the Census Bureau is that the housing units that we see in the imagery is actually greater than the number of housing units in our address list, which is the main reason for our address canvassing. The next slide, this one shows overcoverage, and those are all the little yellow splotches that you see on. This is from Lehigh Acres, Florida. And overcoverage means that the housing units in imagery are less than the number of units we have in our address list. So far, interactive review, this process, going through and seeing all these differences has taken 1 minute and 2 seconds to go through one block. So they're moving through pretty fast. The second phase, active block resolution, if there are any changes from interactive review, any pin set, it'll go to active block resolution. That is actually also done in the office. And that actually goes to a more senior analyst, and they will use a variety of other data to actually see if there's any change in that area. If anything can't be resolved in the office and active block resolution, then that moves over to in-field address canvassing. active block resolution didn't start until April 2016, which makes sense. It has to go through interactive review first before it goes to active block resolution. As of February 14th, we have 1.5 million blocks in the active block resolution queue. We've worked 76,000 of those, and out of that, we've actually completed 92.7. And as you can see, we've resolved almost 70% in the office after it goes to the second review. Those that we haven't, 17.5% went to in-field address canvassing. So the second component of the re-engineered address canvassing is in-field address canvassing. Anything that can't be resolved in the office goes through active block resolution and can't be resolved goes to in-field. We're estimating about 25% of the blocks will actually go through in-field address canvassing, but as we go through and evaluate in-office address canvassing, we'll have a better estimate. This is an example of what a lister will actually see in the field when they actually have a block to work. They actually have a map view. They can drop pins on the map. They can actually see what actually came through interactive review and active block resolution, just to make sure what the changes are. And then the last component of re-engineer, we call it our math coverage study, master address file coverage study. And what this does is it takes 20,000 sample blocks from in the field and it validates that what we did in office actually worked. We started in 2016 and we didn't have any bad review from that 20,000 blocks. So what we're doing in office is working. So I basically gave you a background of where we are and how we're actually building our master address file in Census Bureau. This is my contact information, and I have some cards if you want afterwards. And I think we're going to hold off on questions till the end. Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Lenny. All right, our next speaker from the Census Bureau will be Laura Wagner. Laura is an assistant division chief at the U.S. Census Bureau Geography Division over data collection and products. After completing her MS degree in geography at Portland State University in 1998, she began her career as a geographer at the U.S. Census Bureau. During her time at the Census, she has focused on legal boundary collection, data quality, and data integration. In 2003, she received a master's certificate in project management from George Washington University. In addition, she received a Silver Medal Award from the Department of Commerce for exceptional leadership in building coalitions, transferring knowledge, and mentoring a cross-agency group for geographic boundaries. So we are pleased to have Laura with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Geography, I've been in geography division for over 14 years. And before that, I've been a geographer at the Census Bureau for over 18 years. So it's a passion for me to do the geography work and to do the geospatial work and address work that we do at Census. So it sort of keeps you going and keeps you happy. All the programs that we're going to see, we're going to be focusing on LUCA during this presentation, but the other geography programs that I'm over in implementation, which you're going to be seeing coming shortly, is the Participant Statistical Areas Program. Monique discussed the geographic support systems. The Boundary and Annexation Survey we'll talk a little bit towards the end of the presentation about, and some other activities are going on. At the back of the room are the flyers. I hope you take some with you. We have one on the LUCA, just giving you all the details. It gives you the website. The website has a significant amount of information about to tell you to support our conversations. The BAS flyer is there. And then in short, all the different activities that we're showing here are this flyer here. This one just gives you a short paragraph synopsis of all the different activities and the time frames of when you're going to be seeing those materials coming. So let's get on with LUCA. So the agenda is going to be covering, as you can see, a lot of background, some security, why it's important to participate in LUCA, and what materials you could expect to see this round of LUCA. LUCA, local update of census addresses, was passed into law in 1994. So it is the Census Address List Improvement Act of 1994. where people wanted to see where your addresses were being, where we were shipping our mailing and where we had to get our areas sent to your jurisdictions. They wanted to see and have more insight into what we were mailing to. So Congress passed this law and we implemented it for the Census 2000 as the first activity of this. So we've only done this 2 other times. So this will be our 3rd iteration of this program. But it gets into our other confidentiality and security. The Census Bureau is under Title 13. Title 13 is our restrictive, where we cannot share our address data because it's restricted. So this, when you sign or participate in LUCA, you're signing and saying you're not going to be using this for any other data other than for review for us for census purposes. So if you have questions about confidentiality, come see us at the booth this afternoon or this morning, and we can talk more about it if you have concerns. But this is an opportunity to see where we are going to be mailing your activities. And it's not just for mailing, it's also for where we're going to do update leave. So in the areas where the Postal Service does not do any mailings, we will send a person to that physical address to do update leave and to enumerate that location. So if you don't have, if you're concerned about us not having the correct address for those locations, so like if it's an E911 address, it's an update leave area, we'll be sending someone. So it's still important to actually review that during the LUCA operation. So in comparison, the last 2 times we've submitted this, in LUCA in 2000, we had 3 different operations, which was the first iteration of it. So we had a LUCA 98, LUCA 99, and Special Census LUCA. That was a little much, but we still got a really good response rate where we had 3.4 million addresses enumerated, which is a huge asset to what we had during Census 2000. In 2010, we thought we could include a lot more, so we added a different option where we just provide the address list. Well, people would just do that. So it ended up providing, and we didn't enumerate as many addresses, but we still got 2.9 million addresses added, but it was a significant more work. So part of what was happening from 2010 is this was the reason why we went to the Geographic Support Systems Initiative, was so we could sort of get the files from the local governments ahead of time. So maybe when you get your base, when we go to LUCA 2020, we would have everything in there so it would be less impact to you for this review. So when you're looking at LUCA right now, this is the typical person group of people that are eligible. In the law, it states that you have to be a legal government. So like a state-recognized tribes don't get to participate unless they participate as part of a state representative. And you have to be like an incorporated place. So like a census-designated place can't participate because there's no actual designated government. So why participate in LUCA? So if you look at the flyer and go through here, this impacts your apportionment. This impacts your census counts. You want to make sure that you have the most accurate count possible because federal and state funding is distributed potentially on all of your counts that are coming back to your jurisdictions. If we don't get a census form back and filled out completed, then you're not getting that person counted for your community. And it's important that we get everyone counted so we have an accurate count moving forward, because this is the count we're going to have for our base for 10 years. So keep in mind that our base, when you look at the population estimates and the ACS, when that's it, our base is it's going to be the 2020, just like 2010 was a base for all of the other surveys going on. So when we were doing LUCA for research improvement from 2010 to 2020, we did a focus group to find out what people wanted to see for improvements over that, and that brought out a whole bunch of things, and there's a recommendation online to talk about what was the result of it. There's about 20 activities that were recommended from that focus group. In addition, because we were re-engineering address canvassing, we needed to look how LUCA could support and feed into that, and also how we could do verification. So all of those activities were considered in how we move forward with the LUCA program for 2020. And then again, we did assessments and lessons learned to see how we can improve and less impact of burden to local governments. So what's new? We're offering more streamlined participation. We'll talk about some of those streamlined participation methods when we get further down in the presentation. We're providing digital lists and standard formats. A lot of the biggest complaints is we did pipe delimited, and we got more calls on what a pipe delimited file was versus a common delimited file, which you would think would be odd, but it was pretty crazy where people were just, why are you doing this? We don't understand what you're providing. So we tried to get more common, more accessible data for people to use. We're providing ungeocoded addresses to county and state official files participants. So if you're a local official, you can work with your county official to find out if there's any ungeocoded. We get a lot of addresses. We get a monthly delivery from the U.S. Postal Service for a review and update into our MAF Tiger database. And we get many addresses that are ungeocoded. We try and use address ranges, but if we don't have a map spot for that, in many cases where we got from GSS, we were able to do those map spots from when we got the state files from North Carolina. So you guys are in much better shape than some other states, but we still get ungeocoded addresses. So these, by looking at them through LUCA, if you geocode them, then we will geocode them into the rec jurisdiction. We're going to be providing, includes all the residential coordinates. So any coordinate that we have, so if we got a coordinate from a local file, you'll be seeing that as part of your file for LUCA. So it'll be important to that. If there's going to be files where we didn't have any coordinates, you'll see what we have from what we had in the database. So when you're seeing that on the map, you can see where they're geocoding. So if not going into the correct block, then you're going to be impacting your congressional district development in 2020 and everything else forward, because those blocks are critical for the building of your congressional areas and for your geocoding and getting your correct counts for your jurisdiction. One of the things that we're also going to be doing is multi-unit structures. Before, we would say you could do a star and just do that, but a lot of that geocoding, a lot of errors stem from not having the units displayed and us not getting the correct unit structure back. So like if an apartment complex had 10 units, we would say, oh, star 10 or something, but that didn't work. It just wasn't getting us the information. We needed to know whether or not it was unit apartment 1 or apartment A, because a lot of times the post office wasn't going to be delivering it because we didn't have the correct unit structure. So a lot of that information is going to be in the new system. One of the key new critical ideas that we had, which is new that we've never done before and is now up on our website now, is address count lists. So up on our website, and you can go under partnerships, and if you look on the website, the flyers on the back, it has the URL for it. You go to census.gov and go to partnership or geography partnership. The LUCA page has the downloads. You just go to your state and go to your county or incorporated place, and it'll have the block counts. It will show every block, track block group combination with the count of residents by block and the count of group quarters by block. That is a critical piece of information to help you get where you need to go for research, because as I'm going to keep saying, that 120 days that LUCA has that we've done every decade is not very long. So the amount of research and work you can do now just to break up that workload to find where you need to focus, these will provide you. As we get updates, when we do a review of our data, or what we call our benchmark process every 6 months. So we should be providing it sometime August, another upload of this. You just see if we have any additional updates from the U.S. Postal Service, you'll be able to see that through the new block counts when we post them. Another tool that we did not have in the past was a geocoder tool. We offer a free geocoding tool on our website where you can batch address a list of 1,000 addresses at a time and get a geocode, and you can get a block count exactly like you have what we're providing for our system. So if you're able to geocode your addresses, get that block count, you can compare your two files to see where there's differences in those block counts to help you do that research and get prepared again. We're working towards getting it up to 10,000 addresses so you can do it on your own. But as part of LUCA, you'll get information about that soon in July. If it's too much cumbersome to break it up by 1,000 or 10,000 records, we're going to be offering where you can submit it directly to Census, and within 24 to 48 hours, we will provide you the block lists directly to you through us doing it overnight to try and get that information for you. It's a service we're going to provide you for free, and just so we can help you get ready for LUCA. LUCA participant method, we're going to talk about the new tool. The GUPS tools is Geographic Updated Partnership Software. I know some of you used the Math Tiger Partnership tool last decade, but this is completely different in the fact that we designed it to be more of a core function. We'll get more into that details later. We'll be providing the digital files, and we also will have the option of paper participation. But keep in mind, if you're going to do a paper address list, it's very cumbersome, and you can only have 6,000 or less addresses in your community for us to be able to send a paper map or a paper product to you for addresses. So the GUPS tool is an open source tool. We base it core on QGIS, so it's all open source, and then we put all the interfaces in it. So every single program that we have that you saw the list at the beginning is in this tool. So I think one of the biggest complaints we got from the tools last time is that however you did one for every program, everyone was independent. This is not the case anymore. Every single tool, however you add a line, however you do a boundary review, however you do an address review, is the same from program to program. So it's always consistent. So you're not relearning how to use and how to respond from program to program. So it's not as high a learning curve to be able to get that information. We have business edits to be able to say, it's going to validate, it runs you through these validations, see if things are missing, and finds things for you and edits to help you find what you need. And it's not on the internet, because one of the biggest things that we had is that people said their security people wouldn't allow them to cross over on the internet. And we even had state people when we were trying to do redistricting this time that they could not access an online system. They would not allow it. So it's an limited install where it doesn't impact your systems majorly. So if you have questions, we can talk more about it later. Again, the tool is so useful for us that if you're a paper participant, when you submit the paper submission, we're going to be using the tool to key that information in for you, because so we have a standard submission for processing. So all of that work is going to be doing going forward. This is what the tool looks like currently. This is in test right now. So we have sent it out to 9 governments this month for review, and what you can see in the bottom portion is the address list of where you can look at each address. And you can't see it here because it's Title 13. This is actually non-Title 13 data, but the actual lat long point will display in the map if you zoom in, depending on the scale, and you'll be able to see exactly where we have the point for that address. So and you'll be able to see the blocks, how they currently are. And if it's not geocoding in the correct jurisdiction or anything, you can move that point as part of your edits within the tool. So in doing so, you're going to have all information. And on the side, you can see you have the block count list to see where you might want to pinpoint information. This is doing just an add. You want to add a street, you just type in the information, key it, it'll make it, and then it'll go to the next screen where you just put in the map spot. And if you can see the little blue mark, that is a structure point for a housing unit. And that's pretty much how it looks, and you can zoom in and out for different scaling. So again, the media types, we're going to have electronic mailing lists, you'll have paper address lists, and so forth. So we're trying to give people options if they can't participate. You could have different combinations of things, like if you want to use your own ArcGIS, you can do so. But you'll get the materials through the electronic mailing. So we can't download the data because of Title 13, but we can ship you all the DVDs so you can use it in your own system or use the GUPS tool as you see fit. One of the other things that was different from last decade is that you can see we simplified the minimum address requirements for the system. Breaking it apart was very cumbersome for you all, so we broke it and combined it more. So a lot of people don't always have suffixes and prefixes, so it was just too cumbersome to be asking for all these different fields. So you can see we've shortened it to try and help mitigate some of the information that you have, and you got the structure coordinates. Map media. So one of the things that I heard, because we got shipped, is that at one point we did large format maps and we put the blocks on them. Well, when you do that, when you put the little blocks on that, you ended up getting 7 cases of maps shipped to your office if you decided to do the paper option. That was really unpopular. So what we've decided, we broke the product into 2 products this time if you're going to be doing a paper participation. We're going to have the large format map like you do for normal if you were a paper BAS participant, but the blocks won't be on there. There'll be more of a reference map. But we're going to be giving you a DVD of all the blocks. So you'll have individual block maps so you can actually map spot your points manually on those individual block maps. You just print them by legal size paper. So they're easy. You just print the ones that you need, not have large quantities of maps on your desk, which was really unpopular. So, and if you want those blocks, we can always create them for you, even if you do the digital format for yourself, just so you have them for reference. So our mailings, we're doing an advanced mailing, which has already gone out. So you should have received your notification. In that packet is the user's guidelines. It's an 8-page document. I recommend you look through it. It's very helpful and gives a lot of detail. We're going to be doing an invitation mailing that's, we'll talk a little bit more, that's in the dates, and then we're going to be sending out materials and feedback. So those are the 4 different mailings going to be happening throughout for the LUCA program. So the timings on that is that we're going to be having, so the LUCA mailings for the registration is going to be happening in July. So coming this July, you should look for that registration materials because we want us to have everyone registered by December. So when we have materials start going out in January and February, that everything is in place because you only have the 120 days to be able to respond to the LUCA program. One thing that has been very helpful is that, which we'll talk a little bit more, is that we're going to have in-person workshops by the regional offices, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But in ending all of this to a point, if your boundaries aren't right, then even no matter how much address work that you do, it's still not going to get you what you need. So in combination, you need to be able to make sure that each year up through 2020, January 1st, 2020, that you provide all your annexations so you get all your counts correct for your jurisdiction and any boundary corrections. If you have, one thing we've noticed, like an example in Rhode Island, we were starting to look at the parcels where some, because they were so tightly knit and the areas, they weren't able to, they weren't geocoding to the correct blocks and they weren't able to get them into the correct jurisdiction. So it's important to look at your boundaries and see that they're accurate so we can move forward and be able to have a good address base along with good boundaries. So the regional offices. So David Klein is one of your regional contacts. He works out of the regional office and they're going to be coordinating in-person workshops and webinars. So if you want to work through that, you can talk to Bob and you can talk to the regional office staff, and they're going to be setting those up so you can learn. There's going to be multiple steps of different workshops. There's going to be an informational workshop to talk about the 8-page document, about how to use a tool, and then we'll have other workshops for how to use GUPS, how to respond to LUCA, how to use ArcInfo using LUCA, or vice versa, just how-tos. So keep in mind all of these activities are there for you to help you learn and to be able to support you in responding and having a more accurate base. Also, they'll be available for technical assistance. The one thing that we have this decade that we're going to have a tiered system for the support desk. So you have basic questions, passwords and stuff that'll go to a clerical staff. But if you need to understand how to use technical support and how to use the tool itself, we're going to have technical support staff and regional geographers to help answer those questions. So we've set up that tier system, move forward. The schedule, just as a reminder, we have the January 2017 already went out. If you didn't receive it, the materials are online at our website if you want to see what the packets look like. If you want something sent to you, send an email to the location that's on the packet, the document in the back. Workshops, we're starting to plan them, get them together. David, do you have anything you want to talk about with the current workshops?
Not really. We'll start making plans and making dates for promotional workshops. And again, like Laura was saying, there are some of those workshops where they are promotional presentations about the various products and improvements.
And then with those workshops, then we'll get hands-on how to do the data, how to respond, and that's going to be coming in October. And we just want to be ready. So that 120 days, I know I keep emphasizing it, but that's not very long. That's not very long to look through data. And I think that was one of the burdens that people said, well, it's just not enough time. Well, that's what the law stands for. So, and for us to be able to do validation for through our in-office address canvassing and so forth, so we can give you feedback back, we really have to stick to that 120 days. And so then you'll get your feedback from the submissions and move forward in us processing it. And it just will encourage you to have a more accurate data set. And for North Carolina, that is important. This is what your participation was in 2010. We had 311 people register, and then we had about a 47% participation rate where your state provided over 2 million, almost 2.5 million, over 2.5 million addresses to the census for you to have a more accurate data set. So keep in mind, it's important. You contributed to the success of your state and to your governments to be getting your funding to your state. One of the things that we did get is that people registered, but they didn't submit materials. So maybe they just didn't have the time, or they thought their address was correct. But with that, if you do have something, and if you want feedback, you have to at least submit something to be able to find out how the results of address canvassing and the in-office address canvassing results were. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Even if you don't have a lot of changes or you don't have any changes, you still want to submit something so you can get that feedback material, because you don't want to have a no change and then not see what the final results are from all the different operations that are happening. So the questions about the support desk is the 800 number here, a toll-free number, excuse me, and our LUCA email address and our website. If you need to get hold of me, my email address is laura.l.wagner@census.gov, but it would be better to send it to the LUCA email address because there's more people accessing that account. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Now we're going to get into the North Carolina perspective. Our first speaker from North Carolina is Joe Seawash. He is with AddressNC. He's the Enterprise GIS Architect for the state of North Carolina.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. Also, thank you to our Census colleagues for joining us to give us the national perspective. Bob and I will have some discussion points here for how AddressNC is a program and how Bob's office, as the Governor's Census Liaison, can be a resource for you to help you engage in making sure that we get the information to Census in a timely fashion so that we can get the best count on Census Day in April of 2020. I'm going to lead things off, and this is going to be a very brief 5 to 7 minutes presentation as background on AddressNC. We had a full session actually in this room yesterday afternoon after lunch, so some of this may be a little bit of a repeat material, but for folks who weren't in attendance, we'll talk a little bit about AddressNC in the context of this is a program funded through the State General Assembly to develop an aggregated statewide spatially accurate address data set in partnership with local governments. In the keynote session yesterday, you heard the state's Chief Data Officer, John Corellis, talk about business value. And that was actually the first point that he made. And part of that mindset in the context of AddressNC is that we're very dedicated to creating a quality data set, improvement over time, but the real intent of the data set is to support enterprise business services for both state agencies, local governments, and make them publicly available so that we can derive value from the spatial data set. The data set itself is not a means to an end. The end is the enterprise services such as geocoding, address verification and validation, and other location services that can be driven by having an accurate data set. Again, as part of John's talk yesterday, you heard him reference the Government Data Analytics Center. This is an effort to be able to bring data analytics to state government. And the context there is that the GDAC clients have data sets that number into the tens of millions of records. And if each one of those records is validated or scrubbed against a different addressing data source, when you do the traditional analytics to combine those data sets in longitudinal analysis and other activities, you're not going to get as good of a hit rate because those data sets are being independently verified against different versions of reality, or in plain English, in different address data sets. So AddressNC wants to be that singular data set that is derived in partnership with local governments, so that we can have an authoritative version of our addressing, but also make that available back to you. So those services that we talk about for geocoding, for address V&V and everything else, we want to make sure that those come back to you as an incentive and a reason and a justification to continue your updates moving forward into the future. You also see here on the slide that we're talking about improving the census enumeration for 2020, and that's going to come about in several facets and several ways. As we move forward in the planning and execution of implementing AddressNC, we're going to reach out to the local governments, and part of that outreach and education is going to be an awareness of the address data submission guidelines. When we saw the maps with participation from North Carolina at the state level, it's important to have the right elements in the database so that we can provide the information that Census needs to meet their criteria for integration into the geospatial support system and eventually the master address file. If we don't have that information from the local government partners, that limits the amount of benefit that we can ultimately derive from the process. Bob will talk a little bit about the statewide program response, but basically you saw in 2010 that we had a very solid response, but there were still empty areas. And so what we want to be able to do is use this address statewide database to compare against what Census has in place and be able to do a high-level review of what is in our AddressNC database that does not appear in the LUCA statewide submission, or statewide data set, excuse me, and then be able to look at those that delta data set to see what's appropriate to return back to Census as updates. Obviously, we want to be able to have a statewide submission prepared that's in concert with the Census new construction timeline. That'll be in 2018 to 2019. So the ingest process that we have, we want to be able to forward that to Census en masse for a statewide submission and make sure that that information again takes every opportunity to find those new construction addresses for submission back to Census. And then also, we're going to be participating in the National Address Database Initiative. If you were in yesterday's session, we talked briefly about the Federal Geographic Data Committee's address theme subcommittee. North Carolina is represented in that effort, and whether it is a direct 2020 contribution or something that goes further into the future, National Address Database is very closely supported by Census and can be a resource potentially moving forward for GSS and other activities. Bob, you're next.
Okay, our last presenter from North Carolina is Bob Coates. Bob Coates is an analyst in the Demographic and Economic Analysis section of the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management, the Governor's Census Liaison, and the coordinator of the North Carolina State Data Center Network, which is a dissemination partnership between the U.S. Census Bureau and 45 affiliated organizations statewide. He was elected to 2 terms on the State Data Center Steering Committee, serving from 2010 to 2016, and he leads the NC Geographic Information Coordinating Council 2020 Census Working Group. Mr. Coates has worked with data in state government for over 20 years, and he has also worked at the Raleigh News and Observer newspaper. Bob is a North Carolina native and a graduate of North Carolina State University.
Go back.
Bob.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Oh, I'm getting some sour faces up front on the NC State stuff. Thanks for being here. And you've heard a lot of great information today about what the Census Bureau is going to be doing over the next few years to get us ready geospatially for the 2020 census. I want to talk to you, excuse me. I'm also getting over the plague, so excuse me. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what North Carolina is going to be doing to support the efforts that the Census Bureau is doing and how the state's going to be trying to coordinate and assist what local governments are going to be asked to do to prepare for the 2020 census. There we go. At the risk of being a little bit redundant, the Census Bureau has a lot of alphabet soup that they throw at you, so I don't want to assume that everybody knows all the programs that you see the acronyms for. So we heard a lot about the local update of census addresses. That's something that, as Laura mentioned, the advance letters went out to highest elected officials in January. And excuse me, David and I will be organizing promotional workshops across the state to get the word out about what exactly LUCA is and try to get buy-in from local governments to verify their addresses. In July, letters will be going out again to those highest elected officials to designate a person who will be kind of the point person for address verification for those jurisdictions. And then the much more technical workshops will be happening this fall with with materials beginning to be mailed out February of next year, and that's when you'll have the 120 days from when you receive your materials to verify your addresses. So as representatives, and how many folks here are actually with a local government? Yep, I figured most folks would be. Great. So it's not too early or too late to start thinking about budgeting your time and resources and kind of developing a strategy. And as Laura mentioned, maybe looking at those multiple address units to make sure that you already have apartment numbers for every unit in a multi-unit structure to prepare for that 120 days, because it is a very tight time window. So that's LUCA. The Participant Statistical Areas Program, Laura mentioned it briefly going through. That's where local governments will have the opportunity to recommend the boundaries for sub-county statistical areas like block groups. If you have a community that doesn't have it's an identifiable community, but they don't have a formal government, you can have that area designated as a census designated place, and they'll be able to get statistical data throughout the decade. So that's a once every 10-year program. That's kind of a regional partnership. The boundary annexation surveys, an annual survey, most of y'all are probably familiar with that. It's going on right now. And we heard a little bit about the geographic support system. So these are all programs that the Census Bureau has developed to set that kind of geographic foundation on which the 2020 census is going to operate. Now, local governments are the authoritative resource for addressing, so it makes a lot of sense that the Census Bureau is going to go directly to those local governments to get their address information. And while that's appropriate, it does put some added burden on the local governments to provide that information. So you've got great Census Bureau staff, but there's only so many of them to provide assistance and support in that process. So there is a role that the state can play in helping out, including orange juice. So the state highest elected officials, whereas for things like LUCA, the county and municipal officials and tribal leaders are being contacted to participate, the state highest elected officials are also contacted to participate in these programs. And North Carolina is going to use resources. Our strategy is to use resources that we're already developing to meet state needs to also meet census needs as well. And I would hope that everyone would appreciate that that's an efficiency. That's the way we're supposed to operate. So a great example of that is, as Joe just mentioned, the AddressNC need. AddressNC is going to be working hard to prepare us for next generation 911. There's going to be enterprise solutions for state agencies that have address list needs, but those address lists that are going to be serving state needs can also be applied to filling out, to responding to LUCA. So we plan on, as Joe mentioned, looking at our participation in LUCA. The statewide response is not intended to in any way undercut the authority of local governments. You're still the authoritative resource for your addresses. But if we see that there's a county that doesn't have the time or resources to respond to LUCA, or there's a local government that just doesn't have the resources to respond, then AddressNC can fill that gap for them. So, and I appreciate all the work that Joe and Luis and the AddressNC team have done. In the area of boundaries, the coordinating agency that we have within North Carolina for boundary response is at the Secretary of State's Office in Land Records Management. So during the BAS process right now, they're making sure that everyone gets their boundary information in and do follow up on that. So from the statewide perspective, it's going to be that office that fills in any gaps where we're not getting a response. So as we move into other programs like the Participant Statistical Areas Program, we have the North Carolina State Data Center. So it's a coordination of about 45 different agencies across the state to support data use, census data use, but also participation in programs. Those include all the councils of government in the state, and we also have as affiliates the North Carolina League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners. So for programs like the Participant Statistical Areas Program, we're going to be leaning on our COG affiliates to organize regional training for things like how to use the GUP software system, to organize some of the meetings that David Klein is going to be offering on LUCA promotional workshops or the technical training on LUCA as we get closer to that time. So we'll use our regional partners to organize training, to find location, to make sure that all local governments in an area won't have to travel hours away to get the training that they need. Also, the Participant Statistical Areas Program may actually be coordinated through the COG offices. So if you want to need some help defining what potential block groups would be most helpful from 2020 to 2030, we'll work through that program there. Also, we want to leverage, we don't want to have to create a lot of new communication sources for you. So if we can get you information about what's coming for census programs and where the support is, using things like the listservs and newsletters that the League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners already has, if you're already getting those communications, we'll just use those resources to keep you informed about what's coming. Now, excuse me. All of this work, all these programs that we've just talked about gets us through 2019, early 2020. That's an awful lot of work, and it's very, very important work. Without that, you don't get the geographic foundation that the data is so important to. It gives you very small level data for planning and service providing in your communities. However, if people don't fill their census questionnaires out, all that geographic work is wasted. So the Census Bureau, beginning pretty soon, actually it's starting now with some site visits to the largest cities in North Carolina, is going to encourage folks to create local complete count committees. They're going to beg you to get involved with partnership, to get the word out that, yes, filling out that census form is important to the Census Bureau, but more importantly, it's important to your community. It's important to your county. It's important to your state. So there will be a North Carolina Complete Count Committee that the administration will decide. We'll put it together, and they'll decide a strategy for getting the word out. But we also rely on the local communities doing that. So county-based complete count committees, town-based. You can even have campus-based, community-based. If there's a church that wants to form a complete count committee, you can absolutely do that. And take advantage of things like if there's going to be fairs, local carnivals, events. If you want to use local utilities to put a flyer in water bills that go out to say the census is coming, it's important for Iredell County to be counted. Use those resources. It's whatever works best for putting a local face on why the census is important. And the Census Bureau is developing new resources so the materials will be available to help you out. So if you want posters, there'll be a resource where you can get those out. And the state's going to be there to help coordinate that at a broad level as well. So what we want you to realize is the geographic aspect is very important. There's no reason that you can't participate in LUCA and be on a complete count committee as well. So I don't feel like you just have to be compartmentalized in one area. There's a lot of work to be done. You're not in it by yourself. There's help from the Census Bureau and there's help from the state level as well. With that being said, here's my contact information. So as we go forward, if you have any questions about how you can plug in, get better involved with the census process, please contact me. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you, all four of you. Since we are recording This session, I've been asked to pass around the microphone to folks that have questions, so I'll open the floor for questions. And I'll run around and run this to you.
I'm Deborah Squires. I'm with the town of Chapel Hill, which is why I gave you the stink eye. I have a very detailed address database. Separate apartment unit addresses already. We've started setting up for the next generation E911, and I would love to give it to you to make my job easier in the long run to verify all these addresses. Who do I need to contact? You. Good. I will be glad to give you city limits. I can give you projections of where things will be developed between now and 2020, everything.
Thank you very much.
Okay, questions?
So I work for the county of Moore. I just want to make sure, we already do for the BAS, we do the district lines for all the cities. Is there a process in place for us we do all the addressing for the county as well. Is there anything that we need to go ahead and set up in order to have that authorization, or are we already the authority for the county?
Are you talking about for LUCA or?
Yeah, for LUCA.
Yeah.
On LUCA, I don't know if you can hear me, but on LUCA, the announcement's going to go, the registration code is going to go to your highest elected official, and they have to delegate it to you. So your executive, whoever, I don't know what they call your highest elected official in the county, but they have to delegate you to be the LUCA liaison. And because of the federal law that we have to be able to get through the highest elected officials, when they delegate you, then you sign your Title 13 materials, and then that's when you become the official contact for the program.
Okay, and that will cover us, county, any municipalities in there.
And if a jurisdiction, and I'm going to do, okay, so if you have an incorporated place, you can respond to anything in your county, because it's open, regardless if there's incorporated places in your county. But if the jurisdiction wants to get individual feedback for their own jurisdiction, what they would really need to do is to register themselves and delegate the LUCA liaison to you. So then not only are you getting feedback, but the jurisdiction is getting feedback as well.
Thank you.
And I guess we could back up to that last question. And Chris, I'm glad you're here from the league. So the process for LUCA is that they have to contact the highest elected. So it's going to be the mayors municipally and the commissioners at the county. And they're going to designate someone. So you would be designated to cover the county. The municipalities within your county are going to be contacted as well. If they want you to verify their addresses as well, that highest elected would have to designate you. If what Chapel Hill wants to do is provide their addresses to AddressNC and feel comfortable that they want AddressNC to cover them, when your mayor gets the letter for LUCA designation in July.
I've already filled that paperwork out and sent it in. They handed it to me.
Okay.
Because they knew I had done it in the past. I did the 2010 count.
Right.
And they gave it to me, and I filled out all that already.
That's the advance letter, and in July is the letter that actually designates who the LUCA liaison is going to be.
I'll look for it.
So in July, that'll come out. At that time, if you want to designate AddressNC, then it's at that point where you would say, we're not going to do it, we're going to rely on the state, or,
No, I'll do it.
or the municipality will say, we're not going to do it, we're going to let the county do it. So it's that July time period where they're going to name who's going to be the person.
Okay, so I will have to go to we have 11 in our county, and we do, we're probably going to do it for all of them. So I need to go out and reach out and ask them to designate us to be able to do their jurisdiction.
You can do their jurisdiction no matter what.
Okay.
And you will get feedback because you will get the entire addresses for your county. But you as a county official and LUCA liaison, you will get the feedback. So for each of the jurisdictions, if you're wanting to get individual jurisdictional where they fall within those jurisdictions, you won't get that at the county level. You'll just get the whole county as feedback. So if this individual jurisdictions want to get feedback and they want to see it, and they can delegate to you, so you're doing the work, but then they also will get the information so they know where they are and where they stand as an individual jurisdiction.
Okay.
I know it's complicated, but we have to stick to the.
Yeah.
Let's explain.
And I think just to get back to our communication, and since Chris is here with the league, if we could get like a little snippet of just kind of clarifying that, we can send it through their newsletter to all their membership, that'd be great.
Hi, Christian Klaus from Health and Human Service, State of North Carolina. First question is there an anonymized way to communicate with the census about discordance with particular addresses in enumeration areas? An anonymized way to communicate, hey, we found some addresses, they don't look like they're in the right county. That's kind of been a hang-up for us for communicating those to the census. By comparison with the Postal Service, you can include a patient address with thousands of other non-patient addresses that where the address and the county don't agree. So it's more it's less a concern about the confidentiality issues. But as far as the census, there's no. You basically are down to a handful of addresses.
So anything that you provide to the service, we get a monthly delivery and we update to our master address file from their change address file and from their delivery sequence file. So we process that up to our file once every 6 months. So whatever you provided to them as updates, and they updated their delivery sequence file, which is their database. They give to us. We're the only exception they have for sharing their data set is with the U.S. Census Bureau, part of federal law.
So they're not just sharing ranges, they're sharing addresses with you?
Yeah, we get their delivery sequence file from them.
Okay.
By their Title 30, we're the only exception where they are allowed to share with us for purposes of census under Title 13.
And then the reconciliation, is that for zip code or is that county as well?
Our reconciliation is with geocode. We try and geocode everything to minimally to a jurisdiction, but if it's ungeocoded, meaning that the U.S. Postal Service, they geocode it to the county, and that's what we process. Too. So we'll know that it falls within the county based on what the Postal Service has provided to us. And that's so when the counties get their list for LUCA, they'll be able to see that we have a list of ungeocoded addresses that only geocode to the county, and if it needs to go to individual jurisdictions, then they can fix that during the review period for the county officials and state officials.
Okay, thanks. And with regard to the I guess the GSS and the way that came about. With the 2010 census, there was one county in particular in the state, during the 120-day period, somebody left. And it was that person's job to send the county boundary to the census. So it never happened. But as of what you just said, September 2015, because of the GSS, that really is not a concern going forward, correct?
GSS is the address portion. The boundary annexation survey is every year where we accept boundary updates. And in 2010, the county could have filed a question resolution challenge against it to get the boundaries fixed, which I don't remember which one they did, but all boundary updates are processed every year. So if they know of a county boundary change and we haven't received it,
So
they'll just submit it.
okay, so the 120 days really doesn't enter into that. They
The
can.
boundary annexation survey is a separate schedule for all work that we do. We do it every year, and we notify every single county to our BAS contact. We CC the highest elected officials. BAS is not a legislative, it's an ongoing program that we do through a federal register notice every 3 years.
Okay, and then with regard to the GSS, I'm just curious. It sounds like you guys are working with reconciling the vector data first, and then where that's not available, then you move on to the ortho review. Is that correct?
We get the address list, which we process through, and we do a match for that address list, and we also if there's points associated to that address list, we do a review of those points. If the points are better than what we have, we do a wholesale replacement of those points into the Map Tiger database. So our points then are linked to the current addresses. So we glean, we match one-to-one to replace, and then we find all the additional adds.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I have one myself. Let me see my notes here. It's regarding the GUBs. I'd swear it was about a year ago, but maybe it was a year and a half ago, State of North Carolina did a GUBs training up in Statesville.
Yes.
Okay, I was there and I remember that. Is the upcoming version pretty much the same, or have there been changes made to that?
So each year, we had our first review. Last year was our first release of the GUBs, which was the initial BAS module, and the block boundary suggestion program was in there. Each year we're having a sequence of new ads, and then if there's any enhancements, you'll see it. So for the boundary annexation survey this round, there's some new enhancements to it. The base core system is still there, and then we added for this last December release, we also added the verification for block boundary suggestion program. This coming December, you will have the LUCA module released in it, so you will see all the LUCA functionality, and soon you'll have also the voting districts module in it as well. So we're trying to release everything as we move forward. Each December we'll have a new sequence of enhancements. We're hearing about things. We have an enhancement that's coming out, that's going to be coming out this December, where about placing data in multiple different directories as an example. So there will be minor corrections which we'll be documenting in our users' technical documentation that we provide.
So for the GUPS, the core part of GUPS functions the same for every program. There'll be some different wrinkles depending on the program that you're working with. But if you went to the GUPS training, it'll essentially function the same for BAS as it will in LUCA, as it will in PSAP, as it will in the block boundary suggestion process for redistricting. So the program runs basically the same, just a few different ways.
The minor enhancements that we're going to be facing really are not major, and if there is a major enhancement, we will provide the documentation to tell you what that is, and that will be part of the trainings we do. We're currently developing the LUCA trainings for the GUPS modules because we're currently in test. There will be an online GUPS video at some point for BAS, so you'll be able to find any enhancements that are going in there, but mostly what you had in the training last time is sufficient, because most of what we added was tribal changes that had to update tribal governments, so they had like a different layer that we had to add. So everything you have now is pretty much what you got trained before.
Okay, I just have to learn. I was with City of Gastonia, so I have to go from doing it for a city level to working with the team on the county level, so it should be interesting. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.